Mr. Romanov was a man the world admired, feared, and respected all at once. People traveled from countries far away just to watch him play a single piece on the piano. When he walked onto a stage, the hall turned silent the way a church does before prayer. His fingers moved with perfection, sharp, confident, trained like soldiers marching. His music was not just sound. It was discipline, control, power. And that power made him believe he stood above everyone else. From childhood, Romanov was raised like royalty in music. Teachers praised him, audiences worshipped him, critics bowed to him. Every newspaper called him a genius, a prodigy, a man whose talent could not be questioned. Slowly, praise changed into pride and pride transformed into arrogance. He stopped seeing music as emotion and started seeing it as status, something only the elite deserved to touch. Concert halls welcomed him like a king. Red carpets rolled out, cameras flashed brightly, fans fought for a glimpse of him. Yet behind that glory was a man who forgot where music truly came from, not from wealth or fame, but from heart. Romanov believed greatness belonged only to people like him, trained, privileged, polished. When he taught masterclasses, he pointed out mistakes like sins. When students made errors he didn't correct softly, he crushed their confidence. He thought weakness in music was proof of weakness in character. He smiled on stage, but it was a smile sharpened with pride. Inside, he lived in a world where perfection mattered more than kindness. Sometimes when he practiced alone, the room felt empty despite applause echoing in his mind. He had fans, yet no true friends. He had success, yet no warmth. The piano was the only thing he loved, and even that love was strict, demanding, not soft. People whispered about him behind his back. He is brilliant, yes, but cold. He plays like a god, but feels like stone. He hears music, but does he feel it? He never cared about these words. In his eyes, emotion was unnecessary. Skill was enough. One evening before a grand concert, Romanov stood backstage adjusting his white bow tie. The mirror reflected a man with perfect posture, polished shoes, and eyes that shone with pride rather than joy. Assistants rushed around preparing lights, sound, programs. Everything had to match his standards. Even the silence needed to be the right kind of silence. When he stepped on stage that night, the audience clapped wildly. People held their breath as he touched the first key. The piano sang under his fingers, fast, flawless, powerful. But some listeners felt something missing, though they couldn't explain it. The notes were perfect, but not personal. Like a beautiful statue, impressive, but without warmth. After the performance, Romanov walked through the backstage corridor like a man walking through his kingdom. Staff bowed their heads respectfully as he passed. Students stood in line with autograph books. Fans whispered as if he were untouchable. He loved it. He loved the distance, the height, the pedestal. To him, ordinary people were steps beneath him, especially those who lacked formal training. He believed music belonged to the talented, not the dreamers, to the educated, not the hopeful, to the elite, not the unknown. And that belief would soon be challenged, not by a star, not by a rival, not by another genius, but by a girl with no name, no stage, and no privilege. Someone who carried music not in technique, but in soul. Someone Romanov would laugh at. Someone the world would later rise to applaud. But for now, he stood on top of a world built on perfection, unaware that destiny was preparing to show him what real music sounded like. Not flawless, not rehearsed, but human. And when that moment arrived, even the renowned pianist would fall silent. Alina sat quietly in the audience long before the show began. Unlike others dressed in sparkling clothes and expensive perfumes, she wore a simple dress, clean but old, faded by time. Her shoes were worn, the kind that carried years of walking rather than moments walked on red carpets. She held her ticket carefully, afraid it might tear. It was not bought, it was gifted by a kind neighbor who knew how much she loved music. People around her talked excitedly, flipping glossy programs, rehearsing compliments they would shout for Romanov, the legend, the star of the night. Alina listened silently, shrinking a little in her seat. She didn't belong here, she knew it. But her heart belonged to music. Since childhood, she had played piano on an old wooden keyboard missing half its keys. She learned by listening instead of reading notes. Her mother used to hum beside her, guiding her more with love than technique. But life had changed suddenly. Poverty arrived, illness took her mother away, responsibilities fell onto her small shoulders. Music became a memory, a luxury she could no longer afford. Yet inside her it never died. When the lights dimmed, Alina's breath stilled. Romanov appeared on stage, tall, confident, bow tie sharp, shoes shining like mirrors. The hall erupted with cheers like a storm of praise. Alina clapped too, quietly, respectfully, though something inside her felt heavy admiration mixed with longing. Romanov sat at the piano with the ease of someone born for attention. The first note he played was flawless, like lightning in still air. His fingers flew across the keys, fast, precise, perfect. The audience watched in awe. Alina watched differently. She listened, deeply. And what she heard was skill without softness, talent without tenderness. He played brilliantly, yes, but she felt no heart. When the performance ended, the crowd rose to its feet. Applause thundered like waves breaking against cliffs. People shouted his name, cameras flashed. Romanov stood, proud like a king accepting worship. Alina clapped too, but her heart whispered something. Music should touch the soul, not only the ears. After the concert, a backstage meet and greet was held. Alina joined the line, unsure why her feet moved toward him when her mind told her she didn't belong. Maybe she wanted to speak to someone like him. Maybe she wanted to ask if perfection was truly the heart of music. Or maybe, just maybe, she wanted to feel seen even for a second. When her turn came, Romanov barely looked at her. His eyes scanned her plain dress, her nervous posture, and decided she was unimportant, just another face in a sea of admirers. "I want to play like you someday," Alina said softly, voice almost shaking. It wasn't arrogance, it was hope. Romanov laughed, not kindly, not gently, but sharply like a blade covered in applause. The people around him laughed too, following his lead like shadows. "And where will you play?" he said loudly. "On a plastic keyboard, in a small house with broken keys." More laughter. Alina felt her throat close, but she didn't cry. She only lowered her eyes, carrying humiliation like a heavy stone inside her chest. The renowned pianist walked away, dismissing her like dust. But an old professor standing nearby had witnessed everything, the arrogance, the laughter, the cruelty. He saw not only Romanov's pride, but Alina's quiet pain. He stepped forward slowly, gently touching her shoulder. "You said you want to play?" he asked softly. Alina looked up, surprised someone noticed her. "Yes," she whispered, "but I don't think I'm good enough." What? The professor smiled, the kind of smile that lights a dark room. "Talent is never judged by clothes or wealth," he said, "only by heart." Alina blinked, and for the first time that night, someone's words didn't make her smaller, they lifted her. The hall behind them emptied as laughter faded into distance, but the professor's voice stayed strong. "I believe you should be heard." She didn't know it yet, but this moment was the beginning. The moment a quiet girl with a broken past was invited into a world that never invited people like her. She was no longer just an unknown girl in the audience. She had been noticed, not by fame, but by fate. Alina remained by the backstage door long after the crowd faded away. She could still hear Romanov's laughter in her mind, sharp and cold like winter wind. Every word he threw at her felt heavy, yet strangely, the humiliation did not break her, it stirred something inside her. Something she didn't know existed anymore. The professor stayed with her, hands clasped behind his back, eyes kind but thoughtful. He had seen many musicians in his lifetime, some brilliant, some passionate, some both. But Alina was different. She was pure potential, raw emotion waiting to be heard, and he could not ignore what he saw. "Tell me," he asked gently, "why do you want to play piano?" What? Alina hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because her answer was fragile, made of memory and pain. "When my mother was alive," she said softly, "she told me that music is not sound, it is feeling. She said if I played with heart, people would listen, even if the world ignored the voice speaking." Her voice trembled, but she finished. "I want to play because it's the only thing that ever felt like home." What? The professor nodded slowly, as if her words unlocked something he already believed. Romanov, who had returned briefly to sign autographs, overheard her and laughed again, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Home?" he mocked. "Music is not home. Music is war, technique, control, superiority. Feelings don't win audiences. Perfection does." People around them chuckled nervously, too afraid to disagree with a man of power. Alina stared at the ground, but this time she did not shrink. She breathed deeper, held her hands together to keep them from shaking. The professor stepped forward, not angrily but firmly. "Romanov," he said, "you have skill, yes. But skill without soul is noise, not music." A hush fell. The statement wasn't loud, but it struck harder than Romanov's laughter. Romanov's pride did not like being challenged, especially not by someone older, wiser, and unimpressed by fame. He smirked, mask of confidence back in place. "Very well," he said. "If you believe she can play, let her." He extended his hand dramatically toward the stage, like a performer offering a show. "Let the girl try a song in front of everyone. We will see if your heart is stronger than skill." The professor looked at Alina, not pushing her, not forcing her, just waiting. His eyes asked only one silent question. "Do you want to be heard?" Alina swallowed hard. She could say no, walk away, go home quietly. No one would blame her. But she thought of her mother's faded hands guiding hers across old keys. She thought of every night she wished for a piano, every morning she woke up still dreaming of music. She thought of how Romanov believed she was not worthy, and she lifted her chin. "I will play." The professor smiled like dawn breaking. Romanov raised a brow, amused, expecting failure. The hall staff whispered, security paused, musicians nearby stopped packing their instruments. Everyone sensed something unusual was about to happen. A girl in plain clothes willing to play on the same piano a legend just performed on, unthinkable. unexpected, unforgettable waiting to happen. Romanov climbed down from the stage and leaned back, arms crossed, smirk ready. He believed she would shake, hesitate, fall apart. He believed the audience, if they stayed, would laugh with him. He believed her courage was nothing but illusion. Alina walked toward the stage slowly, like approaching a mountain she never imagined she could climb. Her steps were small, nervous, but steady. Her heart beat loudly, boom, 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 like drums calling her forward. When she reached the piano, she did not sit immediately. She placed her hand on the polished black surface, feeling the coolness sink into her palm. Her reflection stared back at her, a girl with tired eyes but burning determination. She whispered inside herself, just one song, one truth. Romanov watched, bored, unimpressed. He expected stiff hands, broken rhythm, weak sound. He had no idea what waited behind the first note she would play. Alina finally sat. She placed her fingers on the keys, the same keys masterpieces had been played on minutes earlier. The hall was nearly empty now, but those who stayed leaned forward with curiosity. She closed her eyes. Not to escape the room, but to enter her heart. The professor held his breath. Romanov smirked, waiting for her failure. Alina pressed the first key, a single soft note, pure like a tear. Romanov's smirk faded just a little, though he didn't realize it yet. Because that note carried emotion no applause could ever imitate. And it was only the beginning. Alina's fingers rested lightly on the keys, almost as though she was touching something sacred. The audience was smaller now, many had left, believing the show was over, yet the remaining few leaned forward unconsciously. Something about the way she sat still and focused felt different from everyone else who played that stage before. The hall held its breath. She pressed another key, then another. The notes came slowly at first, like soft footsteps into a memory she had kept locked inside her heart for years. Her hands trembled, but they remembered. Muscle memory returned like an old friend. The melody formed with gentle grace, imperfect but honest. The sound wasn't loud or dramatic, but pure, raw, emotional. It was the kind of music that makes silence listen. At the back of the hall, Romanov stood with arms crossed, expression stiff. He expected her to falter, to lose rhythm, to crumble under pressure. Yet as seconds passed, something unexpected happened. She didn't break, she bloomed. Her fingers moved with a growing courage, the tune rising like a sunrise from behind a dark night. Each note held pieces of her life, the struggle, the hunger, the nights she fell asleep wishing she had a piano to play. Her pain became melody. Her hope became harmony. She was not performing, she was speaking without words. Faces softened, conversations stopped. Romanov's confident smirk faded slowly, almost unwillingly. Alina played with closed eyes, letting every emotion she had buried for years flow through her fingertips. She didn't think about the audience or Romanov or the professor watching proudly from the side. She thought only of her mother, the gentle hands guiding hers long ago, and of the dream she thought she had lost. Midway through the piece, her tempo lifted not by force but by freedom. The melody grew brighter, like rain turning to sunshine. Her body relaxed, her breathing aligned with rhythm. She was no longer the shy, humiliated girl backstage. She was a musician, her heart wide open. One of the staff members whispered under their breath, "She's good." Someone else responded, voice full of surprise, "She plays with feeling more than he did tonight." Romanov heard those whispers, and they hit him like a quiet strike. For the first time, he didn't know how to respond. Alina reached the most emotional part of her melody, high notes that shimmered like glass, low notes that vibrated like thunder trembling beneath a calm surface. She poured everything she was into those minutes. Past, present, pain, love, it all became sound. And when she reached the final chord, she held it, long, steady, full of soul. The note floated through the hall like a bird soaring across open sky. When her hands left the keys, silence returned, but it was not empty silence. It was stunned silence. Not one person moved, not one person breathed loudly. Even Romanov stood still, eyes unblinking, expression unreadable. He had expected to witness failure. Instead, he witnessed something he did not understand, heart inside music. The professor began to clap, slow at first, like acknowledging something sacred, and soon others followed. The sound grew, soft applause rising like rain turning into storm. Not wild, not loud, but deeply respectful. Admiration rather than entertainment. Romanov watched as applause washed over her, applause meant for a girl he mocked. He felt something in his chest, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. Was it regret? Was it humility? Was it a crack in the wall he had built around his ego? Alina stood slowly from the bench, breathing unsteady, eyes shining with tears she held back bravely. She didn't smile, didn't bow deeply. She simply looked out at the audience, trembling with disbelief. They weren't laughing now, they were listening. The professor stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. His eyes glowed with pride, the kind one feels when witnessing a miracle. "Well done," he whispered. Alina's voice was barely audible. "Did I really play well?" He smiled warmly. "You didn't just play well, you played truth." Those words reached deeper than applause. Then the professor turned toward Romanov's small smile raised brow. Well, he asked quietly. What does the master think? All eyes turned to Romanov, the man who laughed, the man who doubted, the man who was now speechless. His voice didn't come immediately. His pride tried to speak first, but his heart, long silent, spoke instead. He exhaled slowly. His posture softened, anger gone, superiority cracked. I did not expect that, he said quietly, not praise, not apology, but the beginning of both. Alina watched him, unsure what to feel, fear, pride, relief. A storm of change had just begun, and this was only the start. The hall remained strangely quiet even after the applause faded, not like the silence that came before she played, but a new kind of silence. A heavy, thoughtful one. The kind that stays when something real has been witnessed, and the heart is still processing it. Alina looked at Romanov, standing tall but no longer standing above anyone. His eyes were fixed on her, not with mockery, not with boredom, but with something complex, something he had not felt in years. Recognition, reality, humility. He took a slow step toward her. One step, then another. The room watched. Every person could feel that something bigger than music had happened tonight. When Romanov finally reached the piano, he placed his hand gently on its polished surface, as though touching a memory he had buried long ago. You surprised me, he said softly. No laughter, no sarcasm, no pride. Alina lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. Her heart still raced from the performance, her fingers tingled, her breath came slow and shaky. She whispered, I only played what I felt. Romanov swallowed, a small action, yet powerful in the man who once believed perfection was everything. That, he said, voice barely above a breath, is something I forgot how to do. The professor behind them smiled. For years, Romanov played flawlessly but coldly. Alina played imperfectly but beautifully. She reminded him that music was not competition but expression, not status but soul. The renowned pianist, the man who laughed, now stood humbled before a girl with nothing but heart. A journalist who stayed behind quietly lifted her phone and snapped a picture, Romanov standing before Alina, heads bowed, hands near the same piano. She didn't post it yet, she simply stared, knowing the story was powerful enough to echo far beyond the hall. Romanov looked at Alina again, eyes soft in a way no audience had seen before. Who taught you? He asked gently. My mother, she said. And life, her voice added silently. He nodded as though the answer was more than enough. He turned toward the small audience still watching, and then, in a moment none expected, he spoke loudly, clearly, with humility. I judged her before hearing her, that was my error. Gasps filled the room like wind through leaves. Even Alina's breath caught, she never imagined he would admit something like that. Romanov continued, technique makes sound. Art makes music, tonight she made music. The hall erupted again, not like applause for perfection, but applause for truth. Applause for a girl who carried music in her soul instead of her resume. Alina felt tears finally fall, warm, silent, unstoppable, not because she proved him wrong, but because she proved herself right. Romanov then did something no one could have predicted. He stepped aside from the piano bench. He gestured for her to sit. As a pianist should, he said, not as a guest, not as a nobody, but as an equal. Her knees felt weak, but she sat slowly, carefully, like someone stepping into their destiny. Romanov stood next to her, not above her. He rested one hand lightly on the piano, and with the other he gave a small, respectful nod. Play one more, he requested, not commanded. She looked at him through glistening eyes. What should I play? She asked. He answered with a quiet smile, one that held years of unspoken pain and a new door opening, something that reminds you of your mother. Alina's lips trembled, her heart swelled. She placed her fingers back on the keys, and this time the song came like prayer. Soft, pure, full of love. Romanov closed his eyes. He felt the music for the first time in years. People listened, tears rolling silently, the way only truth can move a heart. The professor wiped his glasses, proud beyond words. And as the melody wrapped around them like light, one truth became clear across the hall, across the night, across the future. The girl he laughed at was the musician he needed to remember himself. 2 lives shifted that evening, not by arrogance, not by force, but by music real enough to break walls and heal wounds. Alina didn't just perform. She transformed. No headings, only story. Transformed. No headings, only story. When the last note faded, it hung in the air like breath on cold glass, warm, fragile, unforgettable. No one spoke for several seconds. Even Romanov remained still, eyes closed, absorbing the emotions he had forgotten music could hold. When he finally opened them, it was as though he was seeing the world and Alina with new eyes. She sat beside him in silence, hands resting gently on her lap, heartbeat still trembling from the performance. She didn't know what to say. She never expected this, not applause, not respect, not a moment where her music mattered to someone like him. Romanov slowly turned toward her. Music like yours shouldn't disappear, he said quietly. She blinked rapidly, unsure if she heard him right. He continued, voice softer than any he had spoken that night, you have something many trained pianists lose. He paused, soul. Alina lowered her head, overwhelmed. Tears gathered again, though she tried to hide them. Romanov noticed, but for once he didn't feel superior. He felt humbled. The professor watched with gentle pride, arms crossed loosely, a smile tucked beneath his thoughtful eyes. He knew a moment like this was rare, when talent met recognition in its purest form. Romanov inhaled, as if bracing himself for a decision he should have made long ago. Alina, he said, would you consider studying piano professionally? The question struck her harder than any insult ever could, not because it hurt, but because it healed. Her breath hitched, her fingers curled. She stared at him with disbelief wide in her eyes. Professionally, she repeated, voice barely a whisper. He nodded. You deserve training, a stage, a future in music. I would be willing to help you. What? Her heart pounded so loudly she could almost hear it echo through her chest. Years of dreams she buried beneath survival began rising like flowers through cracked concrete, but with hope came fear. She swallowed. Why me? You laughed at me earlier. You didn't believe I could play. Romanov lowered his eyes. For the first time he felt small. I laughed because I was blind, he admitted, and pride makes blind men loud. What? The hall grew still as his confession settled into the air. I judged you by what you wore, where you stood, who you were not, he said slowly. But tonight you showed me who you truly are. What? The professor nodded approvingly, his voice calm but firm. A true musician, he finished for him. Alina's eyes filled again, though this time they shimmered not with pain but with possibility. She looked at the piano, no longer an instrument she feared to touch, but a door, a beginning, a second life. I want to learn, she said softly. I want to play, I want to grow. What? Romanov felt a spark of something in his chest, the same spark he once felt as a young boy first discovering the magic of sound. Then let me guide you, he said. Everything moved quickly afterward. The professor offered to arrange training, Romanov offered to sponsor her education, and the few people remaining in the hall murmured with excitement, witnessing a moment they would speak about for years. A once unknown girl was being given a chance to step onto a world stage. When Alina stepped outside the concert hall that night, the air felt different, colder but brighter. She looked up at the sky lit with city lights like scattered stars. She had walked through those streets as nobody, invisible to everyone. Now she walked with a gift in her hands, not money, not fame, but opportunity. Romanov walked beside her, not ahead, not above, beside. You changed something in me tonight, he said softly. She looked at him gently. You changed something in me too. He smiled, genuinely this time. And together they walked to the street where destiny had chosen to rewrite itself. She wasn't afraid anymore. Her heart beat not with doubt but with promise. A new journey had begun, not out of pity, not out of charity, but out of music, out of courage, out of soul. And somewhere deep inside her she felt her mother smiling. The next days unfolded like a dream Alina never dared to ask for. Mornings that once began with chores and bus rides now began with piano keys under her fingertips. Romanov arranged her first training session in his private studio, a room lined with books, framed concert posters, and a grand piano that gleamed like liquid black glass. The air inside smelled of old paper, polished wood, and memory. Alina stood in front of the piano the first day with nervous hands and hopeful eyes. Romanov watched her quietly, noticing how she approached the instrument, not as an object but as something alive. He gestured toward the bench. Sit, he said gently, not as a command, as an invitation. She sat slowly, carefully, as though she might wake from the dream if she moved too quickly. Romanov stood beside her, arms behind his back, the posture of a teacher, but a softer teacher than before. Play something that scares you, he said. Alina looked up, surprised. Scares me. Yes, he replied. Because comfort creates safety, fear creates growth. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. At first, she chose something simple, but then she challenged herself, choosing a piece she once tried to learn as a child but never mastered. Her fingers stumbled in places, rhythm wavered, but she continued, refusing to stop. Romanov didn't interrupt. He didn't laugh. He listened, really listened to the rawness in her sound. When she finally finished, he spoke quietly. You're not afraid of failure, he said. Good, that is the rarest talent of all. Alina smiled, small but proud. Day by day, she practiced with more courage, more emotion, more confidence. Her mistakes became stepping stones, not walls. Romanov corrected her gently when she slipped and praised her when she grew. The professor visited occasionally, offering guidance and wisdom like a grandfather who saw her future long before she could. Weeks passed and something unexpected happened. Romanov changed too. He no longer played like a man proving his greatness. He played like a man rediscovering love. When he practiced beside Alina, his fingers slowed, softened, found warmth instead of perfection. And when he watched her play, his eyes glimmered with something unfamiliar, pride without ego, admiration without control. One morning after she finished a difficult piece flawlessly, he said something he once believed impossible. "I learn from you." Alina looked up quickly, almost in disbelief. "Me, but you are the master." What? Romanov shook his head slowly, eyes gentle. "You remind me what music really is," he said. "Not power, not applause, feeling." Those words felt like music themselves, like a chord of forgiveness, healing, beginning. Soon word began to spread. A young girl with no training was being mentored by the renowned Romanov. Musicians whispered, critics grew curious, reporters requested interviews. Some doubted her, some insulted her. But many wanted to hear her. She was no longer invisible. One afternoon while she practiced, Romanov walked into the room holding an envelope, elegant, gold-embossed, heavy with importance. He handed it to her without saying a word. Alina opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was an invitation to perform in the upcoming International Piano Exhibition, a stage watched by musicians and media across the world. Her heart stopped. "This," she whispered, voice shaking as though the paper weighed more than her hands could hold, "is for me." Romanov nodded. "You are ready." She froze, fear, excitement, disbelief crashing together in her chest. "What if I fail?" she breathed. Romanov stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "Failure is when you do not try," he said. "You will try, you will play, and the world will hear you." Her eyes filled not with weakness but with fire. She nodded. "I will play." Romanov smiled, soft, proud, sincere. "You will not be playing as a nobody," he said. She looked at him, confused. He finished gently, "You will be playing as Alina, the girl who made even me listen." What? Her heart swelled with gratitude, with purpose, with destiny. She touched the piano again, fingers trembling with the promise of tomorrow. The girl who once shook under laughter now stood on the edge of a global stage. Romanov, once untouchable, stood beside her, not as a tower above her but as a witness to her rise. And somewhere deep inside, music was smiling, not perfect, not expensive, but true, no headings, just story. The night of the exhibition arrived like destiny wrapped in velvet. The grand concert hall was unlike anything Alina had ever seen, crystal chandeliers dripping light like diamonds, velvet seats stretching in endless rows. A stage wide enough to hold an entire universe of sound. Her heart trembled inside her chest, not with fear of failure but with the weight of how far she had come. She stood backstage in a simple but elegant gown Romanov had chosen for her. Nothing flashy, just soft fabric that moved like air when she walked. Romanov adjusted her shoulder lightly, not as a teacher correcting posture, but as someone steadying a star about to rise. "Do not play like the world is watching," he told her gently. "Play like your mother is listening." Alina closed her eyes, and in that moment she was no longer nervous. She was ready. When her name was announced, the hall buzzed with curiosity. Some people doubted her, a young girl with a simple past performing at an international stage? Impossible. Others leaned forward, eager to hear the miracle they'd read about in newspapers, the unknown girl who humbled a legend. Alina walked out, the hall fell silent. Thousands of eyes watched, but she felt only one, her mother's, warm and invisible, sitting somewhere in the light. She sat at the piano, fingers hovering above the keys like wings waiting to take flight. She took one slow breath and began. Her music flowed like a story not of success but of struggle. The opening notes were soft as childhood lullabies, then deepened into rich chords that held years of hunger, loss, and courage. She played not to impress, she played to remember. She played to heal. People forgot to blink. The melody lifted into the hall like sunlight through stained glass. It was gentle when her childhood spoke, stormy when pain returned, tender when her mother's memory touched her heart. And then, like dawn rising over a broken night, the music burst with hope. Her fingers flew not from technique but from feeling. She cried as she played, and the audience listened with wet eyes and open hearts. By the final movement, the hall was trembling with emotion. When she pressed the final note, long, pure, shining, the world did not move. It held its breath as though afraid to break the beauty still hanging in the air. Then, thunder. Applause roared through the hall like a storm, unstoppable, rising to the ceiling and beyond. People stood, they cheered, they shouted her name through tears. Alina stood slowly, shaken by the power of her own sound. Romanov watched from the front row, and on his proud, humbled face rolled a single tear. The man who once laughed now clapped until his hands hurt. The man who once believed perfection was everything now understood that heart was greater. He walked onto the stage and stood beside her. The world quieted again, waiting. Romanov lifted her hand, not as teacher to student, not as master to beginner, but as equal to equal. "Alina," he said loudly enough for all to hear, "reminded me what music truly is." The crowd burst again into applause, not only for her performance, but for the transformation they witnessed. The legend bowed his head to the girl he once mocked. And in that moment she became a pianist, not by title, by truth. After the performance, reporters swarmed her with microphones and cameras. News headlines spread across countries by morning. "Unknown girl steals the world with her heart." Pianist who was Laughed'atbrings legend to tears. The gift the world almost missed. Alina returned home that night not in silence but in music. She placed her hands on the piano again, tears falling gently onto the keys. Romanov stood behind her, proud like a father witnessing a child walk into her future. You didn't just play, he said quietly, you changed people. She turned, eyes shining. You changed too, she replied. He smiled, soft, grateful, honest. And just like that, two lives once separate became forever connected through sound, through soul, through a moment that started with laughter and ended with history. Alina looked at the keys, no longer afraid, no longer hidden. She played once more, not for survival, not for approval, but because music was home. Her mother's voice lived in every note. The world listened. And the hall was never silent again. Hall was never silent again.